Hi, this is Claudia Filos with the Center for Linux Studies, and I'm so delighted to be here today with Professor Gregory Nagy and with Keith Stone, and this is the third office hours for the spring edition of HeroesX. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So guys, let's just jump off into the hourly discussion questions for this week. This week, our participants were thinking about hours 5 and hour 6. Today, I think, because we don't have limitless time, I think it would be helpful for us to focus on the responses maybe to hour 5 because there are more of them, and we've had a chance to go over the thread and talk about it a bit, and I think it might be helpful for us to just highlight maybe some of what we see as some possible responses to the question that you posed, Greg, and also maybe point towards another thread that a participant has posted in the discussion board that in some ways I think offers a very interesting response to this question, even though her post was not response to this. I'm talking about the post by Jillian Kiriakou and her beautiful aha moment.
Yes, I really like Jillian's write-up.
Great. So Keith, do you want to just prompt us about maybe what the question was? Do you have it in front of you, or should I pull it up?
I do. So the hour 5 discussion question is, given that Sappho's songs represent a tradition that originated from performances by women, we may ask ourselves, how are these songs relevant to the study of the Homeric Iliad, which represents a tradition that originated from performances by men?
Hmm. Greg, before we get off talking about the responses, Keith and I, can you just respond a little bit about why you chose this question?
Well, I go back to the common understanding of the Iliad as a medium for men. I think most people assume that because the Iliad is about warfare and about life and death confrontations involving men in war, that it's a medium for men and by men. And I've always been struck that so much of the Iliad has to do with perspective on war from the standpoint of women, and those include, of course, Andromache, the wife of Hector, but also Briseis, the trophy wife, shall we say, of Achilles, and the list goes on and on. Even Helen comes across in a very interesting way as an achievement of a different kind of perspective on what warfare is. I love the fact that we see Helen for the first time as she is weaving a pattern-woven story into the web, into a web, and how it's all about Trojans and Achaeans fighting and dying all on account of her.
Right.
So there are all these perspectives. To me, it isn't a men's medium, and that's why I asked the question the way I did. In a sense, I was exploring whether people just have that assumption or whether they'll question that assumption.
Yeah, Keith, what was your response to the kind of responses we were getting on the thread? Or your approach to that question as you're thinking about it.
I forget if I actually said anything on this thread. Oh, I did say a couple of things.
Yes.
Let me see if I can scroll down and find them here.
Well, just as you're looking, maybe I'll just mention that one of the responses that caught my eye was by L.W. Doyle, and he talked about how this is a quote, "Last night I tried singing while crying and crying while singing as I read or performed a lament in the reading." Right? I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing for one of our participants who have tried and shared.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a medium that's all about the experiences of, well, certain kinds of experiences, to what extent can it be recreated or identified with by performing? Well, now that I think about it, my dissertation was kind of about that exact topic, so no wonder I liked it.
Okay, good.
That's for another time.
We'll say just say maybe three sentences about it.
So it was a Hebrew Bible dissertation, since that's my field. though it was advised by Greg in large part. And it is about a poem in the book of Deuteronomy, which is to be performed by the Israelites throughout successive generations. And they are to identify emotionally with Moses, with God, who is kind of the ultimate author of the poem and who is the main character. So through performing these emotions, basically, they are to be transformed through the experience of performance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's an analysis of all that.
Right. So, I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting about the question, Greg, was that it made us think about the active performance.
Yes.
Which is something that we could easily forget as we're reading. And that's one of the reasons why I really love that response by the participant.
Yes, yes, and especially even though Jillian Kiriakou didn't target that question, but had her own separate thread, in a sense, that what she had was the kind of response that I was hoping for, and so I was very happy to see it.
Right, right. Let's go to that thread for a second, and maybe I could just point out a few things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull up Jillian's. It's called An Aha Moment, maybe, period, which I really liked. And so she talks about how it's through the women depicted in the epic that we get a sort of a different perspective on the heroes. She talks about getting a different perspective on Agamemnon.
Could I make a comment on that?
Oh, yes, please.
About the word heroes.
Oh, good, yes.
I mean, the way that the question is worded sets up an opposition between women and heroes.
Oh, good point.
I know what Julie means, but don't forget, if in fact it has been said yet in the book, don't forget that women are heroes too.
Right.
Yes, Helen, we see virtually as a hero in the Odyssey, radiant and everything, as heroes appear to their devotees. So that's. I know what Julian is saying, but also that should be deconstructed. We'll see Phaedra, for example.
That's a good point. Greg, do you have a response?
Oh, absolutely. So the more I think about my question, the more it's a trick question, because it lulls us into thinking that, well, only the male characters are heroes, but just as Keith says, the female characters are equally heroes. Heroes in every sense of the word, and it's just that when you get to the storyline, and if you're being superficial about it, you say, well, the Iliad is about war. Well, it's not about war. It's about the suffering that is caused by war, and how women as well as men react to it, and their reactions are in some ways different, in some ways they overlap. In the case of Achilles, he can lament as well as a woman can. And it's true that in this song culture, women are the virtuoso lamenters in ordinary situations, but in heroic situations, women and men are heroic lamenters.
Right.
I'll put it that way.
And we just had that hangout with Patty League, talking about performance traditions even in modern Greece. And one of the things he talked about are these wedding songs that are sung by men that express the concerns of the bride.
That's right.
Or songs that men would sing. Let's say the fishermen would sing, the sponge fishermen would sing as they're out for months at a time, expressing the concerns of the women back home because the men are away.
Exactly. So we have to see the symmetry here, and the universality of men and women both expressing emotion, and so it's not like football. I'm sorry to be thinking of Super Bowl, where there are all these generalizations that men watch Super Bowl and women don't, and it goes on and on like that. The Iliad is no Super Bowl.
Right. So it's a full community event expressing something on behalf of the entire community.
Yes, exactly. And women are just as interested, even more interested in it. and there may be rules of the game about when women can be audiences and when they can't, but the medium is for everybody.
Well, okay.
And so we see the Homeric master narrator adopting these, say, women's traditions of performance traditions of lament,
Yes.
by incorporating them into the Iliad. And I wonder if you would say that this scene of Achilles lamenting in, is it 18 or 19, is that a reflection of the Homeric singer's virtuosity?
Yes. As somebody who can be as good at lamentation as the most virtuoso laments of women as represented. After all, it's all a matter of quoting different characters singing laments, and they include, of course, Achilles as well as Andromache and Briseis, and the list goes on.
Does Richard Martin talk about this in his Language of Heroes? I'm thinking of something about how he talks about the identification of the Homeric narrator, the Homeric poet.
Oh, yes, he does. And this is the 1989 book, The Language of Heroes, where he shows, and he was the really first person to show this clearly, that, that when Homeric poetry, Homeric storytelling is quoting a character, what the character is doing is performing whatever the storytelling is saying that the character performs, and that includes laments. So when a lament is quoted, it really is morphologically a lament. And if the singer is a woman, that is exactly how we can interpret it. It's a woman's lament, and it is just as anthropologically accurate as when, in modern times, ethnographers record women singing laments. And we can actually compare how Achilles laments and how a woman today laments, and they match. That's the power of the tradition. And I also like the way Gillian, I keep coming back to Gillian Kyriakou statement because I liked it so much. I like the way she matches the songs sung by Chryseis, that should have been spelled Chryseis, and then Briseis and Andromache and Helen, with the situations that reflect on not just these female characters, but also on the men who are involved in the same action.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm sorry to interrupt with coughing. Sorry about that. Okay, so can we respond to something else actually that came up in that thread, which is the idea of whether Achilles is selfish or not selfish?
Yes, I'd love to hear Keith on that, because Keith and I have been teaching the course to college students for so many years, and I think Keith is as familiar with, may I put it this way, the collegiate reaction to selfishness as I am. So, Keith, because you're much younger, I bet your reactions may be even more intense than mine.
Well, I don't know, but we see this a lot with the college, in the college classroom, where students think that Achilles is very selfish, that he's just sulking in his tent, as the saying goes, and that he cares only for himself. And in fact, it's something that many of the characters in the Iliad say. I was just reading a little bit, and when Nestor is bringing an injured, what's his name, Machaon, I think,
yes,
out of the battle, he sees someone going by and says, "Patroclus, go find out who that was. I couldn't see his face." Nestor's response when Patroclus shows up is, why does Achilles care? He's not helping us out. He's not helping us out. He doesn't really care.
Yes.
But I wonder, because we know from things like Sappho and other places, other authors, that Achilles really can do no wrong. He's the superstar. He's the He's the person everyone loves. I wonder if we're supposed to be agreeing with Nestor there. That's been my assumption. But maybe we're supposed to see Nestor as being out of touch here. That Achilles really does care, but his self-respect, can't let him continue to participate in this situation where he's being disrespected by Agamemnon and all the Greeks, because they didn't stand up for him either against Agamemnon.
Exactly. Yeah. Can I push back with that? Which is that one thing that I had talked about when I had talked about this kind of thing with one of the people I studied with, which is the chair of our board of readers, Lenny Milner. He helped me to see the way that when Achilles' prize is taken, the way that prizes are distributed is very significant, which is that everything is put in the middle, and then the community distributes everything, right? Everything is distributed from the center out to the individual heroes. And so when his prize is taken away, it's not just Agamemnon, it's the fact that the whole community didn't stop it too. So they have really alienated him already. They have, and when you, because gift giving and gift exchange is so important in this culture and this society, that they have broken significant bonds when they take back that gift. And
it's very alienating. It's something that Achilles is rightfully antagonized by. Flip side is when Nestor says, "Oh, he doesn't care." Let's try to put that in the second person instead of simply hearing the first person talking. Suppose Nestor said that directly to Achilles. He'd say something like, "What's the matter with you? Don't you care about us?" And you notice how that helps us understand what the rhetoric is. Similarly, a lamenting woman can say to somebody, like let's say in the case of Cleopatra and Meleagros, "What's the matter with you, Meleagros? Why aren't you? Why don't you care more about your people? You should go and fight the enemy." So it's not necessarily a dismissal of Achilles the way a college student might dismiss Achilles as, "Oh, he's just a bad sport and he's taking his marbles home with him." It's more like, again, what's the matter with him, if you put it that way, or what's the matter with you? You should be caring, why don't you care? So it's not that it's a foregone conclusion that he doesn't care, and in point of fact, we'll find out that he cares very much. He cares a lot. So the typing of Achilles may be rhetorically described in some places as if he didn't care, but it's simply a challenge for him to show what he really thinks, which is that he does care.
Right, yes. Okay, so you know what? This has been such an interesting discussion. We already have a lot, I think, for people to absorb. I'd like to suggest now that we maybe take a break from that discussion and see how the community responds, and then maybe we could pick it back up.
Perfect.
Is that okay? So I'd like to move on to just a few more posts that were raised. So one of them is a post that was put up by Richard Smith, and the title of the post is "Two Schools, Neo-Analysis and Oral Theory." And he's pointing us towards a Wikipedia page for Homeric scholarship. And he would like us to think about, he says that there are two major competing, cooperating, contemporary approaches to Homeric scholarship. One, oral theory, he points out, is a label not preferred by some proponents. And he says neo-analysis is another one. So, I was wondering, Keith and Greg, if we could have maybe just a discussion about how we talk about even Homeric scholarship, about what dichotomies are meaningful. Yeah, how can we move forward as we think about this?
Well, could I just start, because of my gray hairs? The older I get, the less I like the word scholarship, because scholarship implies that only those people who are certified, only those people who have certain kinds of credentials may even be allowed to talk about or think about Homeric poetry, and I find that kind of pseudo-professionalism to be damaging to the communicative power of this field. I think people who do research on Homeric poetry, whatever level their preparation, should take on all comers and not exclude anybody. So that's one point I'd like to make. I don't like the word scholarship in this context, and so when people start talking about, well, some scholars belong to one school and other scholars belong to another school, it kind of makes everything, to my mind, rather squishy, as if there were two equally legitimate ways of looking at something. And whereas we all want to make sure that other opinions are expressed and recognized, I would say that to say that there is an oral theory is already implying that people don't understand what the approaches to oral poetics are. The fact of the matter is, and this is just history, that when Milman Parry and Albert Lord were studying the living traditions of South Slavic song culture, what they found was the living traditions of composition while performing and performance while composing. That's not a theory, that's something that they found alive and well. And the only thing that you could justifiably say is theory is how one can apply that kind of ethnographic experience, which is a fact, to ancient texts where we don't have the possibility of recording live performances. But I'm saying when you do have an opportunity to witness live performances, you're not dealing with theory, you're dealing with fact, you're dealing with the real thing. And then when it comes to neo-analysis, there's something a little bit suspect already about the way people say neo. That's because even neo-analysts realize that the analytic approach of their predecessors was something that simply didn't work. It didn't explain, the analytic approach didn't explain the artistry of this medium. And there are lots of negative things we can say also about the so-called Unitarian approach, but the problem with both those terms, Unitarian and analytical or analyst, is that in a sense that is a matter of theorizing. It's not based on facts. It's simply different approaches to how to explain what we moderns may think of as inconsistencies. So to come full circle about the two so-called schools, I don't see two so-called schools, or three or four or five, as if you had to be card-carrying, dues-paying members of an ideology or almost a belief system. It's simply a task of going back to the facts, looking at the language, looking at the text. And a text-based, language-based approach to Homeric poetry is not something that can be categorized as a school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I love also, you know, the way that you began the discussion, just making sure that the dialogue remains open, right, to everybody. Yep.
In other words, people who call themselves neo-analysts, and there are people like that, I love to talk with them, to think with them, sometimes to disagree with them, sometimes to agree with them, but I don't think of them as a school. They're the ones who think of themselves as a school. I think what people like me, and I'm happy to have been a student of Albert Lord, what people like me would think about Homeric poetry is, look, we're just trying to look at the tradition as reflected by the text as reflected by the language that is encoded in the text. And to me, that's not a school. And people who are sometimes dubbed as what are they called, oralists, don't think of themselves that way. I'm not an oralist. In fact, I can go for a whole year without ever using the word oral. I've tried it, and I've lived to tell the tale. There are all sorts of other ways of talking about the medium as we see it attested and as we try to describe it empirically. So sorry to go on and on about this, but I would suggest that anybody who wants to explore this this kind of debate further might look at my book called Homeric Questions. Notice I say questions, not question. And the first chapter of that book, I think, does a pretty good analysis of misunderstandings about approaches to Homeric poetry. So I find the Wikipedia article, although it's very informative, I find it a little bit too schematic and putting things into categories where I don't see categories.
Okay, that's great, and I'm so glad you shared that link. I was going to share that, but we'll make sure that we post that link in the thread and in our discussion board, okay?
And I'd love to have reactions and debates and disagreements, but
exactly.
I think people who have studied with Albert Lord deserve the chance to make that argument that there's no such thing as an oral theory.
Beautiful. All right, Keith, do you have any responses? Anything else that you see coming up in the community right now, or since you have so much experience with the project, do you have any thoughts for people as they prepare to move forward to the next hours?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, but nothing is coming to mind.
Which is okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. So I think at this point, the only other thoughts I have are regarding some threads I've seen and comments I've seen in the discussion board. Still, people sort of, I think, struggling with the annotation exercises and struggling with maybe getting a 50%. And so here's one thing I was wondering about. I really want to encourage people to maybe recalculate what a 50% is in their mind. And I really want to highlight for people the way that the annotation exercises were originally, our intent in structuring them. And I know, Greg, you and Lenny put so much thought and effort into this. This wasn't my creation, it was your creation. So I'm just sort of sharing the good news about this, which is that sort of the 0-point response, the response that might come up as worth 0 points was designed to be sort of reading into the text.
Yes.
The 1 point or partial credit response was designed to maybe represent something that was not reading in, but maybe not yet reading out as effectively as might be done with that passage. And then the 2-point response was really reading out as effectively as possible. Now, I think what's really important is for people to realize that if you are at the place where you are maybe 50% of the time not reading into the text, and we're 5 or 6 hours into the project, that's fantastic.
It
right?
is, and that shows that you're a good reader. So in this scale of 2, 1, and 0, if you achieve a 1 and only a 1, it's really good because it means you're reading accurately. 2 is something like an A+.
Exactly. Yes, I didn't want to be too grade oriented, but I feel like the 50% can be very demoralizing because of the way grades typically work. And so I honestly want to say, I think, a 50% of 1 point, that's like a B or B+. That's a solid grade, right?
Oh, it's I would say it's an A-.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
That's the way I think of it. If you score in your self-evaluation even a smidgen over 1, then that's an A-. And then if you had a straight 2, you would be stratospherically A+. It would be ineffable.
Okay.
And the only thing to worry about is if you consistently have a 0, that means, gee, for some reason or another, I keep bringing my values into it, and that's the only thing that would be any cause for worry, is that if you're consistently under 1, but if you're any degree over 1, you're fine.
1 or over, right? Yeah, great. Okay, great. Okay.
This makes me think that, you know, in the classroom we experience a lot of difficulty with people learning to read. I mean, it sounds simple, but learning to see what is in front of you and to see only that and not to bring your own assumptions to it. It's very hard. It's a challenging enterprise, and it's something that we learned over time, but it takes getting used to.
And Keith, could you talk for a minute? Oh, sorry. And Greg, I see you have more to say, but maybe Keith.
Well, that's all right. When you finish with Keith, I won't forget, I promise.
Good. Okay. So, Keith, can you just talk a minute? Maybe it might encourage people to understand how these same questions are used a little bit in the Harvard classrooms.
Oh, yeah, the annotation exercise questions. So they are homework, essentially, before class. So people are to read the chapter of H24H, Greg's book, and then and also the fast reading, and of course the slow reading that's part of each hour, each chapter. And having done this reading, everyone then answers the 4 annotation exercise questions before class meets. And we look through those answers to some extent. Those of us who are on the teaching team, so Greg and you, Claudia, and me, are in those meetings, and we talk about those in class. So they're kind of culminating homework for people to check themselves as they are doing the reading, both the kind of theoretical reading in H24H and the primary source reading in the source book. Okay. Integrate those two.
So here's why I asked that question. I want everyone to understand that these questions and even the explanations and the responses that they get are not necessarily a last word in the discussion, right? The main thing is working through them, thinking about the responses, going through the process, and then continuing the conversation.
They're really exercises.
Right?
Things you do to increase your skills.
Yeah.
And of course, the college students who do this and who are in a classroom with me and Keith and you too, Claudia, those college students have the benefit of actually writing essays that are graded. Now, when they write those essays that are graded, this self-testing mechanism being assigned a 2 or a 1 or a 0 for every one of the questions, that is not really part of their grade in real life, because, for example, suppose somebody gets a self evaluation grade of 1 in a given question, for a given question, they can argue with their grader about how I think this answer that I chose is better than the answer to which Greg gave a 2 for the following reasons, and they can get an A letter grade for disagreeing. And it's just that the way we currently have things set up, and where we are working with people who have access only to self-evaluation mechanisms, we're pushing people to go beyond the 1 and to try for the 2. But as I said, in terms of letter grades, even a 1 or 1 plus is much better than a 50%, which does scare people,
right.
And it's not meant to.
And even in our project, where you are writing the response, but we can't specifically grade that response in the same way as you would maybe in a traditional classroom, you still get to disagree because of the way that we have, we dropped the 5 lowest scores on the annotation exercises. So in that sense, 20% of the time you could totally disagree, and and those grades don't count. So
exactly, those self grades don't count.
Exactly, yeah. So self scores. Actually, we prefer to use the term score to make the
I like score because grade can really upset people, and it's like a life and death struggle, and that's so not what we want to do.
Yes.
We're simply giving people a chance to test their reading skills. That's all.
Exactly. And here's the thing. We are not in any way trying to discourage people. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
Oh, yeah. And so let me take this opportunity to cheer people along by saying you've already gone through the hardest part of this this whole experience. And this is the part where we have to do special maneuvers like saying, well, read some parts fast and some parts slow. But from here on, the amount of reading will be less and less. And I think the appeal of the reading will be more and more easy, since most people find the Odyssey, for whatever reason, easier than the Iliad. That might just be one of these first impression things, but when you were asking Claudia about what Keith and I can foresee in the weeks to come, I would say one very pleasant thing is that I think people will find that the Odyssey will be easier going, simply because people have had to come to terms with the Iliad already, and that's already a huge learning experience. And this kind of exercise is one where the more you read, the better you get at it. So I think people are in for a treat when they read the Odyssey, and they'll be able to do it faster and better. And then I hope we'll occasionally revisit the Iliad and see the richness of it even better than before.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to stop with those great words of encouragement. It's 4 o'clock, so we need to sign off. So I appreciate your time that you joined us. I hope that everyone finds this video and the encouragement helpful. And we'll be back in a week with more reactions to what's posted in the discussion board.
And thank you, Claudia, for bringing out in Keith and me and yourself that spirit that makes it all worthwhile. That is to say, the pleasure of the text, the pleasure of reading, and the pleasure of making your own judgments about something that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Okay, we'll talk soon. Take great care till then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.